Hey everyone, today I am going to be talking about Melancholia. This film came out in 2011. It was directed by Lars von Trier. Lars is of course one of my favorite people to talk about and to learn about just because he's a real piece of work. He's wild, he's eccentric, he is a borderline toxic personality. Always provoking, always pushing beyond the threshold for security and comfort, I think, with his viewers. A man who is bold and manic in his interpretations of reality as they are perceived through the human condition, through the human experience. And yeah, he's the kind of person that just appears to be very volatile and dangerous, yet still compelling. Some see him as a hack and others see him as a mad genius. And I look at him as kind of coming from the Gaspar Noé school of thought, very much kind of the Dadaist mentality. He's making art out of his pain, and he seems to be okay with, even maybe pushing for, in some instances, a messiness to his films, because his films are often really unfocused and unrefined and definitely perplexing and controversial. It often feels like through his films he can express his own sense of masochism. He feels like a tribal leader who is like carving cave paintings, like but with his own blood. A lot like Noé, but I think in a different way, in a darker way, and perhaps a more self-serious sort of way. Yes, he is a grim on top of grim type of director, but I think, when he is at his best, he's using his pain, using his depression, whatever you want to call it, and he's trying to explore different facets of it, trying to explore the dimensions of it. He seems more interested in wanting to explore it rather than wanting to escape it or change his thought process. And Melancholia, of course, is part of his, his three-part depression film series. The first entry, of course, being Antichrist from 2009, and the final one being Nymphomaniac Part 1 and 2 in, I think it was 2013. And Melancholia, of course, coming out in 2011, was the middle entry in the series, and this particular aspect of depression that he's focusing on here is kind of a strange mix of more kind of realism and then mixed with more like Tarkovsky poetic images. It is a heightened experience. The distorted kind of grimness that I was talking about before does feel extremely real at times. Other times it feels, of course, as you'd expect from Lars von Trier, very pretentious and very boastful. Perhaps even misguided at times. I would say oftentimes he's quite misguided in a lot of ways, at least how it appears to me, yet there is a sort of weight to his experiences that makes it alluring. And I admit, whether or not it's conscious or not, I do struggle a lot with the lack of focus and the meandering in Lars von Trier films at times. And, like with this movie, there are a lot of references to great works like Shakespeare, or even like great classical pieces like, Tristan and Isolde by Wagner. It's quite grandiose in that sense, where it's trying to give you that feeling of it. But I feel like a lot of those artists, Shakespeare and Wagner as an example, I think that they're better artists. They just are, at least to me. Even referencing like Ophelia and Hamlet, it's like with Hamlet, yes, there is, it's a very, very dark story exploring the darkest aspects of the soul, yet there's a major irony to it. It's full-bodied. And with Wagner too, there are layers to the depths of that despair that I don't quite feel to a full extent in this film. And so I've seen Melancholia many times, even though I really do struggle with it. I've seen it multiple times because I keep thinking there's something about it that is intriguing, and I wonder if it's going to change for me over time. A new appreciation for it, but it still remains my least favorite of the three films. When it comes to expressing a lot about depression, this one just feels maybe the most thin, the most skeletal. All three films are very messy, don't get me wrong. Antichrist, yes, is quite muddled in tone, but there's a lot going on there. It is quite a complex film, and there's a lot about it as it goes on that it's very unexpected. I think there are complexity in the ideas of what he's trying to explore about men and women, about masculinity and femininity, the dichotomy between that desire, whether it's sexual desire, whatever, and self-loathing. And all of that is dampening this mysticism that's created throughout the film that I find to be really, really special. And with Nymphomaniac, even though I'm not a fan of Part 2, when it comes to Part 1, I think I was very surprised about that one as well. I was so surprised by the sense of humor in it. He really did allow more of a cheeky side to come out of it, more of the satirical black comedy, which, he's done before, but I think this is maybe his most accomplished in a while. But also through that humor, there's a lot of deep pain and devastation, again, as one might assume, from Lars von Trier when he's making films about depression. Those films, I think, just open up the experience of what it means to be in pain, to be lost, to be searching for something. And I think it's more worth pondering. And while Melancholia, you can argue, is more meant to be kind of a simple, more meditative expression of depression, if I want to watch a film that's about that sort of subject, where it's really kind of exploiting it in an artistic way, that's totally cool. I am down for it, but at the same time, personally, I would just like to gain something from that, where I feel like I'm taking away something from the experience of what it means to feel pain. And, I just don't feel that with this film as much, even though there's a very hypnotic quality to it. And there are parts of it that I think are stunning. There are parts of it I think that are very well made. Even when it does meander and it's all over the place, it's repetitive and all of that, I do find certain moments of it to be very rich. I have an interesting perspective with the first half of the film, or I should say the opening, the wedding sequence, which it's just a long sequence. When I first saw it, I hated it. I hated it so much. Now looking at it, I have a lot more appreciation for it. I think there's a lot of things happening here that are, yes, maybe a little bit unconventional in terms of the way that it's edited, and it is, yes, it's meant to be chaotic, but that's the point. There is something about the way that he settles you into this big party, into the mood of it, that is very dreamlike, where it feels like you are kind of, reality and what is concrete is just slipping from your grasp ever so subtly. Like your logical comprehension of things is not quite there. And it's one of those things where you can't quite put your finger on it. And those are always my favorite sorts of feelings in movies when it comes to kind of trying to build tension or tone. And you have to say, for those who know what depression is like, really debilitating, kind of dangerous levels of depression, he understands the tone of it absolutely, more than I think most people do, and he expresses it better than most. It is a very disconnected quality, this whole sequence, because Justine, our main character, is the one feeling this depression. She's getting married, yet she's so disconnected from all of these people. And that's why none of those characters feel fully formed. Their conversations seem out of place, or like there are aspects missing from it. The lethargic feeling that you get kind of creates that remove from reality. It creates that dreaminess, but it's not like dreaminess in a fantasy sort of way. It's in an unpleasant sort of way. No meaningful relationships are built here. Once something even comes close to materializing, it completely dissolves. And conversations here are very awkward and poorly written. I mean, there's a lot of dialogue in Lars von Trier that I think is poorly written, but it fits in a way. It's like watching a sitcom without like a laugh track, and that's very haunting. And the scene is building because Justine, little by little, is unraveling, revealing herself and revealing, her emotions or lack thereof. She seems dead in the soul. That's the danger, the danger of feeling no warmth from a soul, feeling nothing in your heart and no color in the world. Everything is drained. Everything feels black and white. Your pleasure centers are depleted. And von Trier understands that it's like a starvation, that depression is like being very, very thirsty in a world without water. And I mean, really, that's what it's like. Everything you once loved is a shell of what it was. Your favorite food, your favorite colors, your favorite music. None of it connects in the same way. And I like how he shows both aspects of that. Like, when things are really, really grim, they're just grim. It's not like he's trying to draw any sort of beauty out of it or romanticism. And it feels, when you're watching the movie, it's not pleasant to watch this. Really, it's not. It feels like you are in a prison. And I think the prison is the slowness, is the way that he's messing with time. Time really messes with your head in this film for sure. But I also do like that he has this big kind of larger than life cosmic interpretation for grief through the idea of the world ending. And then that is contrasted with the simplicity of this normal life, the life of Justine and her sister and all of that, the intimacy of a human life in that perspective on mortality. I like this sort of sci-fi, more fantasy interpretation of that because, yes, when you do have monumental depression like that, where you can't function at all, I'm talking about the kind where you can't function, where you are, steps away from being catatonic, or danger to yourself, there is this sense of just astronomical grief that feels bigger than you. I don't like the idea of romanticizing pain, but at the same time, there are moments where that heightened feeling, that distortion, brings out a sort of strange beauty. And that's where I think the more poetic sequences come into play, the Tarkovsky imagery interwoven in there. The way that pain and art can come together for a creative person like Lars von Trier, can get very trippy at times. That sadness can get really trippy. those distortions feel very real. And at times it almost feels like you do have a superpower, like you can sense certain things that you couldn't sense before. It's a strange, I hesitate to say gift, because you do see the world in a different way that can be quite unique and interesting, but at the same time it's also this deep, deep burden, and you wouldn't want anyone else to have to deal with it. And it's almost alien-like, that heightened sense of awareness. So her ability, I think, to foresee the future, as an example, that perceptive awareness is, yes, that is the depression in the eyes of Lars von Trier. And so this imminent death that is going to come to everybody in the world in this film, you know, it hits differently for Justine. That's also true. I found that to be also very interesting and a unique thing, is that when a disaster happens of any kind that shakes up the lives of the people around you, and maybe you know what it feels like to have deep, deep pain, but maybe other people don't in your life, they lose it. They get hysterical because they don't know how to deal with it, but you are used to it. You're desensitized. Like Charlotte Gainsbourg, she's not handling it that well, because I don't think that she's really thought about her mortality in the way that Justine has. That's why Justine is very calm. It's like, you know, pain, if anything, is more of a release from this crippling reality. But, you know, she talks about how the world is evil and how there is no life outside of Earth, and I don't know. Again, I'm torn with this film. I admire aspects of it. Like I just said, there's a lot of what happens in this film that I feel is really important, I think is really interesting to explore when it comes to depression, that you don't often see, that sort of dizzying, sort of nauseating feeling. And that beauty amidst the pain that I mentioned, that pierces to depths you never thought you could sink to. But at the same time, it's like, okay, what am I gaining from this that I don't already really fundamentally understand? And what about the experience is really that important for us to have to experience it in this way? I don't know, it feels like kind of reveling in pain for the sake of reveling in it a lot of the time, with no real break from that monotony to challenge Justine. And as characters, Justine and the people that are, you know, around her, the people that are supporting her in the film, I don't know, I just don't feel like they're necessarily the best representations of depression in a complex way. And, you know, I'm always interested in films like this, and I'm interested in artists, again, like Noé, Lars von Trier, people who really kind of push into those dangerous areas of what makes humans toxic. And there is an excitement to that can be opened up in ways that you never expected. But at the same time, I think you have to be careful about what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. Are you really more just reveling in that masochism? Because I do think that von Trier is, in a sense, proud of that masochistic nature, absolutely. And I do think that that's an interesting point of view to have. I think there's a lot there that can be interesting to explore. But again, I want it to challenge me as a viewer, and I want it to challenge the artists themselves as well, you know, a bit through the experience. That really does, like I said, push us to the edges of how I perceive that experience. And you can do that in all kinds of ways. You can do it in a more cerebral way. You can do it more in a meditative sort of way. I would just prefer for it to move into a more unique direction that is a little bit more unexpected. Compared to this one, which feels very much like doom is coming, and we're just kind of on a one-track road until that happens, with little variation from that. But I will say the ending did affect me more this last time, I think. I felt that devastating power, but also heightened at the same time this feeling of one's final moments. It leaves a chill in your heart. But then when I look at the film as a whole, it's just, I don't have that same sort of excitement. So yeah, you know, overall, with von Trier, as we are used to, he is more the antithesis of what we consider more kind of organic narrative structure. But with von Trier, there are times when the messiness actually really contributes to why I like it, but then at other times, it doesn't. I just think that there are better films to explore pain, more unique films that explore pain as it exists within the body, how it festers and what it does to the mind, and how those perspectives can shift depending on, you know, outside variables. And I do feel overall, just in art, in this culture in particular, there are a lot of great artists, a number of artists that do, I think, glorify pain a bit too much, glorify sadness, and I think that's inherently toxic. And while I do, again, consider people like Lars von Trier to his glorification of things to be much more interesting than your average director. But I also do feel like, you know, if you're going to come more from the experimental school of thought, which I personally prefer, I think it's you owe it to your audience in a way to find more interesting ways of exploring those facets through the unexpected, through the experience. And I don't know, I felt I missed something this time. I would say if you are a Lars von Trier fan, absolutely, you've got to see Melancholia, because, I think it definitely splits people. Some people think it's a masterpiece, some people not so much. So it's always interesting to hear different perspectives on it. And certainly if you're an art house cinema fan, I think it's worth checking out, but I don't think I would recommend it just on average, just for the casual moviegoer. No, that might be a bit of a struggle. But anyway, yes, that is my review. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that's something that you're interested in, you can go to the website and go to the shop. There's plenty on there. And if you want a commission or something like that and you have any questions, you can certainly email me. My email is in the description box below and I'm happy to chat with you. And I'd like to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for all that you do, all of your support. If you are interested in becoming a patron, the link is below for that, as well as my social media information. You can watch more videos here and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.